understand that who they are when they've got a helmet on is different than who they are without a helmet on.
Even when they're being quote unquote honest in themselves. And here they are at home playing with the cat. Christian Horner has a family. Even when that's happening, you still know that it is reality TV. Ross, how the hell do you watch Formula One?
I start by taking a nap.
Okay. Welcome to It's Not the Car. This is a racing podcast. My name's Sam Smith. I like adjectives and renewing my comp license even when I don't actually have a reason to. I also like I like pre-war crash gearboxes because really I'm that guy at parties. You should probably just go stand on the other side of the room and talk to somebody else. I'm intolerable. Ross, am I intolerable?
You're not intolerable. No.
Okay.
No.
Definitely.
I can tolerate you.
Lying. I can see it in your face.
Yeah. And what was interesting, the intro thing, when you said, my name is Sam Smith, I'm going, I usually say I'm Ross Bentley. And I think there's a difference there between saying I am and my name is. And I'm going, which one's better?
Well, it depends on the definition of am, depends on the definition of is, depends on the definition of your eternal existential soul and how you view the concept of being and light and sound and dark and shade. And on that note.
So those of you listening go, which one is the writer?
Right. Yeah. Well, I'll give you a clue. It's the guy who can't shut up and thinks he's sounding really important and deep when he's not. So, again, on that note, we don't have Jeff today. He's off traveling. It's just me and Ross. We miss Jeff. He's way more important. He's way more important than either one of us. He's probably off saving the universe. I don't actually know where he is. Do you know where he is?
No.
It's probably how he wants it.
I wasn't in charge of his travel arrangements.
Oh, I didn't know. You guys talk. I mean, I'm the third wheel here. You guys are cool, and I'm just basically like, hi guys, how are you? So our show today it's ironic because Jeff, if one of the three of us is an expert in anything, it's going to be Jeff. But today we're doing a format without him that's called Instant Expert. Now, this is normally where we take an episode and we bring you up to speed on the basics of a big and complex topic in the sport. The focus is usually some subject that everyone thinks they know a bit about, maybe, but one where there's also a lot of misconception and wrong answers out there. And there are wrong answers out there and misconception, partly because that's how humanity works, but also because that's how car culture and racing culture works, right? So we've done one of these shows on tires. We've done one of these shows on oversteer. I have a long list of things I think would be fun to do a show like this on in the future. But no matter what, the hope, I think, is that we give you enough information so that you could be that awful, annoying person at parties from time to time, but you shouldn't because you're ultimately a better person than I am. And the side note here is that if you already know what we're talking about in one of these shows, well, hey, maybe the whole thing ends up being entertaining and you get to make fun of me for not knowing something I don't know. Ross and Jeff know a lot and I know a lot less. And with that, Ross, this is where you say yes.
Yes. So when you said the expert is, you could be the awful, annoying person.
Yeah.
I'm just sitting here kind of going, oh, is that me?
Ooh,
am I the awful, annoying person?
Oh, but see, that's what's great about the human condition is that we all at some point stand there. And if you're in any way trying to be, I don't know, not terrible, you go, oh God, am I the awful, annoying person? And the difference about being a writer is half the time you just have to tell yourself no and then keep going. You're usually wrong and you are the awful, annoying person at that point. But that brings me to today's focus. Today's focus, the topic of the show is how to watch Formula One. And that sounds easy, right? Because we all do it. I mean, most of us do it. Some of us probably listen to it. Some people don't watch it at all. And those people are probably better people for it. But in the end, if there's one thing I've learned after spending more than half my life around racing and cars and stories and media, is that you absorb and enjoy something differently. You usually get more out of it if you know more about what's happening in what you're watching, which that sounds easy in itself, but it's not. And with Ross, the thing is, he's a performance and driver coach. He's one of the best in the world. So it's his job to watch racing and get something out of it. We've mentioned this before. He's a fine young man who's nevertheless spent most of his life on the road and at racetracks, dozens of weeks traveling for work a year, stands on the side of racetracks. You watch footage, you look at data, you figure out what's going on. That's both obvious and not. You draw smart answers from it that most people don't see. Did I get that right?
The part about traveling, and spending most of my life on an airplane and in hotel rooms and stuff, absolutely right. And when I wasn't doing that, I was standing on a corner or staring at a computer screen. Or my favorite part was kneeling down next to a car and talking to a driver. Well, actually, sorry. To be fair, as a coach, some of my other favorite times was actually when I was inside that car as well.
For a second, I thought you meant like kneeling down and talking to the driver, not as a coach. And I thought, well, like, what does that mean? Like as a stalker? As somebody who's like sizing him up to like give him a new pair of underwear? Like, I don't know what that means, but So when we say the best how to watch F1, we're not talking about like sit in front of TV, put eyeballs on TV. We're not talking about like, always go to Coda, or the view is best at Spa if you're lying in the gutter at Eau Rouge with the cars driving through your spleen, blah, 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 go to turn 6, whatever. Like none of that. We're talking about what to think about, what to look for when you're watching in person, you're watching on TV, when it's interesting, when it's boring, because, F1's boring, kind of a lot. What to do when it's somewhere between interesting and boring, and you're wondering if it's going to go one of those two directions again. But in any of those points, it's what you do to get that extra bit of the story and the context. And again, it sounds so easy, right? But when we were planning this show, something told me Ross has a better way than I do, probably a pretty good way to watch this stuff. Might not be the only way. It's definitely not the only way, but it's probably a pretty good way. So on that note, I say on that note a lot, man, everybody's got verbal tropes. On that note, Ross, how the hell do you watch Formula One?
I start by taking a nap. Because if you have a nap beforehand,
during the race?
No, beforehand. That way it's easier to stay awake during the race. Now, hey, to be fair, there are some F1 races that are just brilliantly fun to watch. And there are some that are not, right? And I think we've gone through various periods. And I started watching Formula One. Well, when I really started watching Formula One was 1979, when a fellow Canadian named Gilles Villeneuve started racing in Formula One for Ferrari. And then at that time, it was, I would not miss a race. If I was off racing somewhere, couldn't watch it. I'm thinking we had a way to tape races, but I'm not really sure. Actually, I don't know whether we could do that back then. But
stone tablets and a guy with a chisel and a hammer.
Exactly. Yeah. So I've watched F1 off and on during the years, and there have been periods of time when between my own racing and just being gone, there were years where I probably watched one Formula One race, and that's all I had time to watch. And other years where I'd watch many of them. And there were some years where it was like, F1 race, don't bother. Like, it is just so boring. And other years where it's like, I really want to watch them all.
And that's interesting, right? Because like I'm the exact opposite. I tend to consume the sport more through analysis, through clips after the fact. I'll go read something about it. And if the race sounds really interesting, then I'll go back and watch it. But most of the time, and some of this was because I used to travel a lot for work. Some of it was because I still travel a decent amount. Some of it's because I have family. But it's most people don't sit there and watch an entire season. And even when they do, sometimes you can feel like, well, that was not that was a waste of time, but if you only sit down once every 3 to 6 months to actually consume the thing, watch the thing live or even on tape, if it ends up being a kind of a snoozer and you don't get a lot out of it, you can sit there and think, well, not doing that for a bit. But when you sit down to watch it, when the thing starts, and the Gilles thing is important, right? You started watching because of a deeply compelling driver who every minute was doing something that was at least interesting. So that doesn't always happen. And those guys are those people that end up in the sport are uncommon enough that when they arrive, everybody makes a big deal about it and we all get really excited because that means that no matter what, something's gonna be worth watching. But when those people aren't there, there's still a lot happening. So let's start with what you see when you watch the actual on-track action, the race starts. You told me once that you think Formula One drivers suck at racing, which is like both the simplest take and also there's so much nuance in that. And coming from you, it means something different than coming from like, I don't know, a 9-year-old kid in elementary school. What did you mean by that? And what do you see that tells you that?
Well, first, I'm a terrible spectator. In everything, I would rather do than watch.
Okay.
That's I don't know. That's the way
That's
I was
fair.
born or raised or whatever, right? So when I watch racing, I watch it for a purpose, and the purpose is to learn something. I'm a learning addict, so I watch racing to learn. A couple of years ago, my wife and I were going to go to Europe because it was part of the trip where I was taking drivers to the Nürburgring and Spa to drive. And just previous to that was something called Wimbledon. So we had an opportunity to go watch Wimbledon. And the weekend before, my wife Robin says, "Hey, it's the British Grand Prix. Let's go." So we go to the British Grand Prix and at Silverstone, and I'm kind of going, "Well, this is really boring." Because first of all, I can't just walk into pit lane, which I spent my life being able to walk into pit lane.
Yeah.
As an F1 spectator, I could not do that. So there was some frustration there. But I guess to your point is when I watch F1 or any racing, I watch it for the purpose of learning. When I watch F1 drivers race, I don't see brilliant racecraft. And I watch an IMSA race and I see brilliant racecraft. Why? Because they have to pass. There's multiple classes, different types of cars that force passing. And you see drivers in very equal cars, but one car has a little more top end, one has a little more braking. So they have to think about passing. When I watch F1, first of all, generally the cars, they're really close. Is a Alpine or a Haas or whatever as good as a Red Bull? No, but the differences are pretty small. So on one hand, you think, well, okay, then it's more difficult to pass. But F1 drivers, they came up through the ranks they probably did more passing when they were racing go-karts than they have ever since. So they hop into whatever, Formula Renault, Formula 3, Formula 2, GP2, they work their way up into Formula 1. And if you watch any of those races, sure, there's more passing in them than there is in Formula 1, but still not a lot compared to drivers that do sports car racing with endurance racing, where there's a lot of that. So they never had to think about how to set up a pass. And I watch for that.
Okay, so there's one of the things that I wanted to talk about with this. I'm glad you said that because one of the things I wanted to talk about with this was there is so much about watching motorsport that really that A takes that context we talked about earlier to make sense, but B doesn't always present as what it looks like, right? And so I sat down this morning and kind of jotted down a couple of questions that both I've wondered about before I knew enough or learned enough to see the kind of not the subtext, but the second or third layer of what was going on. I'm not saying I always see it, but just to look for it. But I jotted down a couple of questions that are pretty common stumbling points when somebody first gets into the sport, right? Because one of the neat things about F1 is that it's grown massively in the United States over the past few years. And there are a lot of fresh eyes. There's a lot of new people coming to it and watching it. So the first thing on this list of questions is how do you tell who's battling somebody versus just a car driving next to a car and trying to get through traffic, right? Because that's one year I was watching, I forget what it was, Spa with with somebody this was years and years ago with a girl I was dating, and she was like, "Oh, cool, they're racing each other." I was like, "No, they're just driving next to each other." She's like, "But it's really close." I'm like, "Nah, it's not. There's air there, and there's other things happening." So how would you tell somebody? What would you tell them to look for in that moment?
Well, and something you said there, I really want to spend some time on this. Is you said what do we see? Is it real?
Yeah.
Let's spend a little bit of time talking about when drivers are interviewed, what we see and what is real. Okay. But for sure, I mean, when I'm watching F1, for example, and a couple of times I've taken advantage of the, I forget what it is, through Sky Sports or something like that, or with one of those things, you can go on and you can actually you can watch the race on TV, and on your laptop, you can have sort of the in-car camera from a view. I've watched that twice like that. But most of the time I don't do that. But I look at, I look at gaps between cars, so they're pretty much most times on an F1 coverage, there's the, Max Verstappen's in first place and George Russell is 1.1 seconds behind him. And Lando Norris is 0.8 of a second behind Russell. So I'm going, okay, first of all, Russell does not have DRS. So he is working at trying to get within DRS zone, which is that 1 second gap. Mm-hmm. Lando is already within that 1 second, so he's got DRS. So I'm thinking about where they're doing that and the gap there, and going, okay, are they, is Russell trying to be within 1 second? Because there is another factor here, is if you get within a second or so of a car, it upsets the air coming off the car in front, or off the car in front. So you have to work harder to stay in that, because it's called aero wash, where you now have less downforce. So now if you get within a second or so, and it sometimes depends on the track, it could be within 0.6 of a second, sometimes it's within a second and a half, you have less downforce on your car. So now to go the same speed, you have to work the tires harder. So now there's the strategy of tire management. And, are they trying to do a 1-stopper, a 2-stopper, a 3-stopper? Like, how many pit stops are they going to do? When are they going to change tires? And the driver and the team are thinking about, is it okay to push really hard, even if that uses up the tires more? Or is it, no, stay back a little bit, just save the tires? And so drivers are, one of the things that's so impressive about F1 drivers is they're managing that. They're managing diff settings. They're managing all sorts of different setup stuff on their car. And some of that is the team's telling them a little bit of what to do, but some of it is they just do it. And they're managing all of that. And that, that's impressive. But I'm thinking about that. I guess it kind of fits into the race strategy part of, when is a driver pushing? When are they not? When are they trying to set up a pass? When are they biding their time and saving the tires?
So that makes sense. And that leads me to the next. And again, these are like, if you've paid attention to the sport, think about it a certain way. These will be obvious questions, but this is stuff that it also pays to remember, even if you know all the reasons and all the answers that Ross is giving. So the next question is, how do you separate car behavior from human behavior? And what I mean by that is someone who's dealing with a car that's having, let's say their car has, the rear isn't very secure. Let's say they're having rear traction issues, front grip issues. They're having, downforce issues, something to do with the way the car is dialed, set up, broken, any of that, versus so-and-so just really is pretty sloppy today, and look at their inputs. And, that might not be sloppy for you or me, but that's sloppy for one of the best athletes in the world. How do you draw the line and identify, and what would you tell somebody who doesn't know what they're looking at with that? How would you kind of nudge them in the right direction of seeing the difference between the two things?
Really interesting question. And I'm thinking about, like, because I've been around the sport all my life, I can look at a car, and especially open cockpit cars, And I know there's not a lot of head movement because the cockpit surround is so supportive of the driver. But sometimes you can just tell from the attitude the car has, and sometimes it's the head position of the driver. I know that sounds weird, but if you watch really, really closely, there are times when you can see Lewis Hamilton's helmet is at a different angle than it is at a different time. And you have to watch really closely and a lot of time to build up the pattern that you notice that. But then you start to look at, okay, when a driver is doing this, you mentioned sloppy. If they are, dropping wheels at the exit of corners, if they're missing apexes, when an F1 driver misses an apex, it's not by 2 car widths, right?
Right.
It could be, one lap they've got a tire on the curbing, and the next lap they've got half the car on the curbing, and the next lap that tire is not quite touching the curbing. That's sloppy. And F1 drivers make mistakes. That's a fact. But how big that mistake is tells you whether the driver is pushing really hard. And then, the fun part is asking the question that you're asking, I think, is, well, is that the driver or is that the car? And the answer is yes. Because some drivers, and this is the part that I find super interesting, is some drivers can take a bad car and do wonders with it. I'm looking at you, Fernando Alonso.
My boy Alonso. My boy, mwah, Alonso.
And then there are other drivers who, when the car isn't working for them the way they need, they struggle. I mean, I'm looking at you, Sergio Perez and Daniel Ricciardo, for example. And I'm not just singling those two out because there are a lot of drivers that are like that. But to me, watching Alonso is so enjoyable because sometimes you see him working with a car that's not working, or more importantly, you see the bandwidth of his brain to be able to do things. Like sometimes you'll see him just ease off a little bit to put himself in the right position when they get to a corner, so that it kind of stacks up the other car behind him a little bit. Or one of the things that F1 drivers do, this whole DRS thing, right?
Yeah.
Where there's a DRS detection zone that if you're within the 1 second as you cross that point, on the next straightaway, you get to open up your rear wing and go 10 miles an hour faster than the car you're trying to pass, which I think is a weird rule. Anyways, but you see some drivers that will come into a brake zone and they'll pass before the DRS detection zone. And now when they come out of the corner, the other car behind has got the advantage of the DRS. Some other drivers, Alonso, are smarter to know, make that pass just after the DRS detection zone so that when you made the pass and you get the advantage of the DRS at the next straightaway. And that's the kind of stuff that's going on in Alonso's brain while he's driving. That, and we've seen examples of him. Where was it? Miami last year, where he's on the radio asking a question about Lance Stroll because he watched it on the big screen as he was going through one of the corners. Like, wow, that guy, he's just... So I love seeing that. I love seeing, because that gives you the glimpse of what's going on inside the brain of these guys.
For the record, you have just passed the Ross Bentley identity test. You just mentioned his brain bandwidth, and then the angle of the helmets, where like sometimes I'll look at it and go, oh yeah, he's just doing his helmet is definitely still in the car. And you're like, no, there's another like 2 degrees of angle there. Like that's some incidents. Seriously, dude is coming apart. I'm like, yeah, he totally is. You're right. So given all that, there is so much to watch and so much to look for that it can be difficult to see in person. It can be difficult to see on the screen. But what's different for you when you're at a racetrack and on the side of the track, looking through a fence, or you're walking around the paddock, whatever it is, with that level of the sport? how do you read what's going on with the track surface, what's going on with the cars versus television, and how much of that kind of granular detail is on the broadcast that most people assume isn't? Because I think a lot of people assume, especially in America, where the broadcast is not dumbed down, but just more kind of standardized and less tweakable. I think a lot of people assume that there's just not as much to be learned outside of the commentary and the greater picture of the race you get. How does that change for you?
Well, first off, and I don't want to discourage somebody from going to a race, but you can actually learn more watching on TV.
Yeah, totally.
Because you get to see more, right? When you're at a track, typically you see a little section of track. Now, the biggest difference when I'm at a track, I listen. And there is nothing like, and the British Grand Prix at Silverstone 2 years ago, we're in a section of track. And at one point I turned to my wife and I go, hear that? He's on the throttle sooner. And so I'm just listening to, they're coming through a corner and you hear just when they start to crack back on the throttle, you can hear that difference. Or, you might be in another part of the track and you hear them do a little coast and lift. You hear this, like that kind of a thing. Like you hear them coming off the throttle and then you notice a car going to the brakes and oh, they're in fuel save mode. They're having to, now in Formula One, that doesn't really happen because they don't need to save fuel. But then you'll hear them come to a corner where you can tell that they're trying to save the tires. Like they just come into a corner, and sometimes you see that, like you watch a Formula One car, especially, it's just like boom, it just changes direction so dramatically. You're thinking, like you kind of shake your head and going, what is this, a cartoon? Like it's just so dramatic. And other times you see them kind of, that same driver, same car, it could be 10 laps later, and you see them kind of what I call bend the car into the corner. And you're thinking, okay, well, they're saving their tires a little bit. And I will say that kind of stuff is a little easier to see at the track. But you can pick it up on TV as well. When they show that camera view or a camera angle where, it's pretty consistent and you see a couple of cars go through and you see one of them just like, boom, change so dramatically change direction, and another car come in there and it's kind of, wow, that's a little bit more lazy in the change of direction. And what I spend my entire life doing is asking questions. So then I go, well, why? Is it driving style? Is it that car doesn't change direction, like the initial turn in, so it's got a little bit more initial understeer than the other car does? Is it just the the nature of where they are in the tires? And then is it the confidence level of the driver? And that's a cool thing to kind of go, oh, how confident are they right now?
Until I started talking to you about the sport, which has been, we met when I was working at Road and Track and just started discussing all manner of things. But until I started talking to you about F1 in particular, I never thought about the fact that, and I feel really goofy for not thinking this, but I never thought about the fact that at that level of the sport, pro athletes still work and think like people do at the local kart track. And it's the errors are much smaller and the changes in mood are much smaller, but you're still talking about people who have days where they are less confident. And you would think, okay, well, sure, fine. All right, Checo knows he's getting old and he's not in the part of the curve anymore where he's like the sharpest Checo we've ever got, but he's still pretty sharp. But maybe he wakes up one day and looks at Max and goes, oh God, my knee jerk there would be, no, he's Checo. He's there. Like he's there. They're still paying him. He probably still deserves it. Why would you? Well, no, he's human. He feels that. So given all that, what does it look like when that confidence is there, when they're doing really well in spite of the situation because of that confidence? How do you read that? And this is where I want to get into the interview thing, right? But how do you read that either in their actions in the car or the way they talk to broadcasters? What are you seeing that, I mean, I clearly didn't see for years? What is it?
So first of all, one of the most fascinating seasons of F1 for me was one that everybody thought was extremely boring because
Really?
because Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg won every race, I think. And what was that, 2015 or something?
Mhm.
I don't know if they win every race, I think, between the two of them. And Rosberg ended up winning the world championship, whatever that was, in
I don't
around
know off the top of my head.
2014 or 16 or 15 or whatever that was. Maybe it was 16. I can't remember. Um, the Mercedes were just totally dominant, and people going, Formula One's boring because we know who's going to win. It's going to be one of those guys. I found it fascinating because from race to race, you could see who had that tiny, 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 tiny little bit of extra confidence. And yes, drivers at that level, world champions, if their confidence level dropped by 0.01%, well,
It makes a difference. Yeah,
it makes a difference
right.
to the, like, I don't know if you know, but in Nico Rosberg, if you notice, his helmet was all black. He never painted it.
Okay. Don't think I
And
remember that.
the reason was, he said, is adding paint to the helmet
Yeah.
added, like, I don't know, 2 grams
Right.
to it. And that extra weight could make the difference. It could be like a thousandth of a second. And the number of times that they traded poles by a thousandth of a second was, well, it was more than once, I think.
Yeah.
So, at that level, it is so close and so small. But you could just see, from race to race. And some of it is, you mentioned a little bit of the interview part and stuff. And by the way, sometimes if I'm home for a weekend and there's an F1 race on Sunday, but I'm going to be busy that day coaching, I'll watch FP1 or FP2, because that's available on TV now, which never was long when I first started Formula One watching. But you can watch that, and during those practice sessions and going into qualifying, there's often more. Well, there's often more interviews with drivers or team people, and subtle little things, from body language to the actual language they're using when they're talking. You go, wow, this driver is ready. Or this driver, there's a little question mark in their brain. And, then if you watch enough, you start to see the pattern of, well, Lewis Hamilton, he, he kind of always complains about something and then finds a way to overcome it. That's who he is.
Yeah.
I think that's what drives Hamilton is, if everything was perfect, he would have retired, I think, by now.
Do you
I think he wants to be the superhero that overcomes the challenge.
That's interesting. It makes me want to get all forward on the couch and ask, well, okay,
Yeah.
That's interesting. So we wonder if part of his process is to verbalize what he has to fight against and to do it in a public manner so that everyone knows that he's fighting against it, so that he knows that he has reason because it's real, because he's now identified it. That's what I love about the interviews, is because on the surface, you watch a bunch of people who are so media trained to the nth degree and who have so much background and like so many PR people sculpting them and coaching them and pointing them in the right direction and saying the right things, and then telling them, above all, like, take all these lessons and also be natural. And underneath all that is always this undercurrent of that thing you talked about earlier, of them being people, and the fact that they may have just had a crap day in the car, or they may have been like Verstappen, may have been up all night on iRacing, screwing around, or just, I don't know, not thinking about the day tomorrow because he's got so much confidence because he's Verstappen, right? And that's what else do you see when you watch those interviews, and what do you see that really, really strikes you as human, like to the core? How often do you see somebody just all of the layers strip away and they're just a person?
Well, first of all, I think that's the part that I find maybe most fascinating about all sport, is when you see the human come through. And unfortunately, what we see in the media often is not real. People go, "Oh, Max Verstappen, he's just an arrogant jerk." You know what? Okay, for all of you Dutch people listening right now, take this the right way, not the wrong way. But Dutch people tend to communicate in English in a very direct way. I have some Dutch friends who, they're the nicest people in the world. But if you first meet them and listen to them, you go, "Ooh, wow, they're aggressive." No, that's just their communication. And I think Verstappen is a guy who gets kind of labeled with this arrogant, aggressive kind of person. Every now and then, if you watch Formula One enough, and I have not watched Drive to Survive in the last couple of seasons. I did the first 3 seasons, I think, and it sort of, you saw some behind the scenes stuff. I've seen video of Verstappen with his, I guess, adopted stepdaughter kind of little person, and he just looks like the nicest dad in the world. And you kind of go, there he is. Like, he is human. He's got that. Now, when he gets into the car, he switches on a different personality, behavioral traits and everything. But, we see that part of it. And I'm going to say there are a lot of drivers who through the years have gotten reputations. Another driver that, fellow Canadian who raced in Indy cars, Paul Tracy, who I know reasonably well, who the way he came across on TV and the way he is as a human, very different. So I think, a lot of that. Michael Schumacher, I'm pretty sure is a really nice person, but I think a lot of people didn't see that in him. And so I'm going to say what you see on TV sometimes, don't read too much into that, their personality around that. And then also understand that who they are when they've got a helmet on is different than who they are without a helmet on. Sometimes that switch is not immediate. How many times have we seen a driver get out of a car after a crash, take their helmet off, and go ballistic? And they did things that they wouldn't normally do if they'd had time to calm down or cool down. So I find that whole part, and some drivers are quicker at making that change, and some it's more difficult for them to make that change. And there's a whole thing around identity and all sorts. So I find that whole human piece extremely fascinating, and reading stories about, the reports of what's going on, watching some of the free practice sessions because they get some interviews, hearing, Martin Brundle talk about having a discussion with Charles Leclerc, you pick up little kind of pieces of all that stuff, and then you go, they're human, and they act differently in and out of the car.
And I think that's one of the remarkable things about sport, televised sport, and broadcast globally sport specifically, televised sport in general and broadcast sport specifically, is that so much of it we're tempted to draw so many conclusions from what we see, right? Because this the way the mind works. Like, you take the information you have, and then you start connecting the dots between it, and you don't. It can be really difficult to stop and think, oh, well, this piece that I'm seeing might be the whole. It might be a piece. It might not even be a piece of a piece. But on some level, you have to remind yourself every single time you watch any part of this that we don't know anything about these people until we get a massive amount of information. And that might be watching every single interview that, say, Ricardo's done and realizing that, oh, wow, like some of the grinning goofus is his personality. And some of it is something else. And some of it is a hat he puts on. And then you go back and you watch the first season of Drive to Survive. I recently went, just kind of like did a speed watch of the first season again, and you look through it, and that was before anybody knew what the show was going to be, before anybody knew if it would last more than a season, before anybody would know if anybody would care, and nobody had any clue that it would light off the audience in America the way it did. And everybody is so much, everyone from the drivers to the managers to even Gunther, all of them are so much more. It's less performative, for one thing, obviously, but it's also their emotions are so much closer to the surface, and they still, A, they're still professionals, B, they're still professionals who are aware there's a camera in front of them, so they are guarded and careful. And even when they're being quote unquote honest in themselves, and here they are at home playing with the cat, Christian Horner has a family. Even when that's happening, you still know that it is reality TV. But there is whatever the people they are, that kind of underlying current is closer to the surface. And you go back and after that and you watch more current stuff, and everything is calibrated and dialed. And some of it is because it's reality TV, right? The directors, the producers are nudging people in a certain direction and nudging the edit in a certain direction. And some of it is because they just know it means more than it did. But we're so tempted to take those ingredients, even if you've watched, again, like every interview that Danny's ever done, we're so tempted to take it and draw great big dots between it. But it's one more example of Dunning-Kruger. You think you have the whole picture, and we just don't.
Yeah, sometimes, when you watch Ricardo, who doesn't like Daniel Ricciardo? Like, with that smile and his positivity, you can't help but love the guy, right? But every now and then you see him smiling and everything, but you can kind of tell there's a little crack in there, right?
There's something in his eyes, yeah.
Yeah, there's just something that's like, you know that he's worried. He's got the pressure on him. He's not totally confident. He's confused. So it's been interesting to watch that. And my experience with Drive to Survive, so, kind of since we're talking around TV, some TV stuff here, is the first season was actually really, really, really good.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that, now, first of all Formula One drivers have been trained, like you said, they've had all media training, and they're careful and they're guarded, and they, got to get the sponsor plug in and everything. There's a few of them that still have the real person there. And I got to say, F1 drivers are better at this than maybe NASCAR drivers, who are so trained to get the sponsors to spurt the sponsors' names out that you kind of go, is there a human in there? But I'm going to say, like, it almost seemed to me as Drive to Survive went along, many of the actors in the TV show started to play parts.
Oh, God. And Gunther in particular. You saw him just dial it up every single season. It got more Gunther, heavier Gunther harder.
Yes. Yeah. And I don't know how much of that was whoever putting the show together was saying, more of that, please.
Right.
Or when it got to the editing room, it was like, oh, that's just boring. That's him being a human. Cut that out. Put the other more F-bombs.
Right.
So I got to say, that's why I actually stopped watching Drive to Survive, because it got to be a little bit too much of the soap opera.
Mm-hmm.
Now, on the flip side of that, I'm not saying don't watch it, because there's some brilliant footage of cars on track. And again, I mean, I love watching the subtlety of it. As much as I love watching the human, there is something about an F1 car pounding a curb and just and you can just see that tire, like, it's almost like it's digging into the track surface.
Yeah.
And you're thinking about the commitment that it takes for a driver to do that, to go, I'm just going to toss this thing in here, and I know that it's going to stick. And then there's others going, and I hope it sticks. And that's the difference.
And I love that stuff, right? I love that. And it's like, how I'll never get enough of watching, this, what is it? The high speed camera footage of tires grazing the barrier, grazing the Armco at Monaco. I'll never get enough of that, and I will never get enough of high-speed footage of watching cars go over curbs, and you start to see the winging, the end plates flutter, and you see bits and pieces of the car flexing and moving, and sometimes stuff that you think, well, why does that flex? Is that flex on purpose? Is that something that's there because it needs to do X and Y and Z, or is that like it's just a byproduct, and like I don't know, Tito had to make it slightly lighter, and they needed to move some mass to the back, so like that's a little, and they're dealing with it, right? I love that stuff, and you don't get that in the broadcast, right? And even in the European broadcasts, which are more detailed 1,000 ways. But
and if you watch close enough, you can see subtleties in driving style. You'll see a driver who is a little bit more gentle with the way they turn the car in. Like if you're watching in-car camera, and to be fair, I mean, I spent a lot of time looking at this stuff, and there was a time, it was during when Schumacher was still in a Ferrari, and I'm going to say the last couple of years of him being in the Ferrari, and this was me being geeking out here to learn. I'd recorded all the F1 races, and then I went back and I chopped out all the in-car camera views.
Wait, really?
Yes.
For some reason I was thinking you were doing this on VHS, but how?
Wow, crazy. To be honest,
it was Betamax, Sam, and that. No.
Yeah. It was those big reels, I don't know.
Scissors. Yeah. It's like how the Beatles built 4-track albums. It's fine.
Exactly. Yeah. But what I did was I took all that video, and I took all of the in-car cameras, and then I sat down and I watched, here's Michael Schumacher, as many in-car camera views as I could watch. Here is Mika Hakkinen. Here is Damon Hill. Here is Jacques Villeneuve. Here is so-and-so. And I just watched.
Oh, man.
I mean, in-car camera, kind of all you can really see is steering movement. You can't see their feet, unfortunately. Somehow we should get that. They need pedal cams.
I want a footwell cam. I never thought about that before.
Oh, it is so cool. So all you can do, you can see the steering input and then what the car does. But if you watch closely, you can see differences. And so I guess I've trained myself to do that. I'm not saying that everybody listening to this podcast should go ahead and do that, but why not? What else you got to do in your life that is more important than
nothing? Nothing. Also, please, we have footwell cams in literally every other part of the sport. Write your congressman. Get us foot cams in F1. I want it. It's going to happen. I want it now.
Yeah. And so if you watch that, so I've trained myself to look for that. So now when I see in-car camera, I see subtleties of just how they turn in. You can see drivers who will come in deeper into the corner and turn the car more aggressively and sort of what I call square the corner off, where think about it as coming down, sharp point, and pointing the car back out again in a tighter corner, slower corner. And you see other drivers come into that same corner and sort of, there's more of an arc, more shallow arc on the way to the apex. And the only way that you can get the car pointed in the right direction from the apex on out is if you use the brakes more to rotate the car. So that's where, I see the differences between a Max Verstappen and a Fernando Alonso. They have a different driving style. Hamilton has a different driving style. Ricciardo is, like, you can start to see that. You can see who brakes half a car length later than another driver. Now, you have to watch closely. And again, to be fair, I've trained myself since I was a little kid to notice stuff like that. So there are times when we'll be watching TV and I'll go, "Did you see that?" to my wife. And she'll go, "What?" And I'll say that. And she goes, "Oh, okay, I get that." And I think it was, I try to remember when it was. And Robin makes some comment about, "Oh, I noticed his EOB is different." Now people go, "What? EOB?" And the breaking point.
So this is why Robin is rad. One of the 1,000 reasons why Robin's rad.
So I've trained her well as well. But, so that, and then, so there's some driving technique stuff. There's, like I said, you can see some drivers who set up a pass and other drivers who just respond to, "Oh, there's an opening, I'm going to send it." And often they don't make it work. And you go, what were you thinking? And, I'm thinking this year, as an example, this year at Monaco with Ocon and Gasly.
Yeah.
It's like, Ocon sees this tiny little gap, is like, I'll send it. Well, it's not going to work, dude. Whereas somebody else would have gone, okay, I'm just going to set this up a little bit better. And that's the part that like I said, when you brought it up at the beginning, F1 drivers to me are not great racers.
Yeah.
They're really fast. They're brilliant. And their commitment and all of that stuff is just amazing. But in terms of wheel to wheel and setting up a pass, if you want to learn about racecraft, watch IndyCar Racing or IMSA.
Okay, so back up a second. So the note, first off, do you still have that giant stack of in-car footage? Is that still in your basement somewhere?
It is on a hard drive somewhere.
Find it so I can come to your house and never leave. Okay, so going back a bit though, the driving style and the personality, and setting aside the fact that like the personalities we have assigned to these people, we only know so much about it, yada, yada, yada. It's inaccurate. How often, take that as road, but how often do you see a driving style mimic personality of the person? And I the first person that comes to mind when I think of that is Kimi, right? And I could not describe, if you put a gun to my head, I could not tell you how Kimi drove the car except to say, well, he drove it in a very Finnish way. And also he drove it a hell of a lot like Kimi. And sometimes you watch Danny Ric and it's like, yeah, okay, that's definitely Danny Ric. But how it doesn't necessarily line up with the grinning goofas. How often do you see what they do in the car kind of parallel who they are? Like, the Kimi vibe, right?
All the time.
This is why you're Ross, because I'm like, man, I want to ask him this thing because I don't know. And you're like, no, Sam's there every time.
No,
moron. Put your glasses on.
Now, to some extent, and again, remember that somebody's personality or their behavioral traits, they change when they put a helmet on.
Right.
Ricardo is Mr. Personality out of the car, right? But you know that he has a trigger.
Mm-hmm.
It's honey badger.
Right.
And if you know anything about a honey badger, they're not nice little animals.
No.
They're crazy aggressive. And the way Ricardo drives, I mean, man, he's about as good as anybody in the world on the brakes. He can outbrake himself. He has a couple times. Yeah. But he's got that kind of an aggressive style. And then, get out of the car and grin and laugh about it, right? So when Ricardo is having fun, he's as good as anybody. I think that he's had some years where he's not having fun.
Yeah.
And that has an impact. So personality traits, their state of mind, it's hard to see I'm not sure we get to see Perez often enough, but I'm pretty sure that if we saw him in some interviews in the past bunch of races, compare those interviews with what you saw of him at the beginning of the season,
right?
And you'd see, almost to the point of, and I don't know if that's the case, but you'd almost like the shoulders kind of slumped over.
Yeah.
Like you can see it in body language.
Well, I remember we were talking earlier, like I said, there have been whole years that have gone by where I've only consumed F1 through recaps and clips and analyses. And what that meant was that there were a couple of years where like I didn't see these guys doing things. And like I'm way behind on Drive to Survive. There are big holes in what I've watched from work travel and family stuff, blah, blah, blah. But I didn't see these guys on video for big chunks of a season, sometimes a whole season. And I came back at one point, and I remember it was somewhere in the latter third of the Checo Perez arc. And I came back at one point, I'm like, what happened to Checo? He's so sad. And it wasn't like the guy was frowning all the time, but he just looked physically older in a way that had nothing to do with how he looked and everything to do with how he carried himself. And you could see that something, and I later learned obviously what it was, but you could see that something had just, the guy's backpack of emotion was just, it was more full of stuff. it's funny. I didn't even think about that till you mentioned that. Wow.
Well, and it says a whole lot about team culture.
Yeah,
And,
totally.
And by the way, when you're at a race, if you're at an F1 race, yes, it is difficult. Well, no, it's impossible to get super close to the teams.
Yeah. Which is a
unless
shame, but it's
which is different than an IndyCar.
I was going to say, that's the great thing about
Or
Indy or
IMSA.
IMSA, right? You can
Yes.
walk through the paddock and basically, you don't want to do it, but you could spit on some of the tires and cars and engineers, maybe find Jeff.
And that's the reason why F1 doesn't allow it, because you went around and spit on cars.
I'm a very dirty human. I know.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Why did I say
But
that?
But, you know, there are places, you know, even at Silverstone a couple of years ago, you know, as I'm going to say, well, no, yes, it's the only Formula One race I've ever been at in my life with a spectator ticket. Every other F1 race I've been at, I've been involved in some way and had some kind of credential that got me somewhere. No, was I sipping on lattes with Lewis Hamilton? No, but I could get in the thing. But even at Silverstone 2 years ago, you could get into positions or you could get into places where, you know, you're kind of looking through the fence, but you can see some of the team stuff. And I got to say, I mean, after all these years, I still get blown away by a team's hospitality area, their pit equipment.
Wow.
Like it's
Mr.
so impressive.
Fancy.
Yeah,
no, it is
yeah,
though. It's bonkers. These buildings that they air freight in and assemble into these 2-story lounges that look like, the last one I was in was, I think it was McLaren's at Coda, and it looks like somebody's, I don't know. I mean, you kind of imagine it's like how a modern day Napoleon would go on safari. Everything it doesn't look like the kind of thing you could deconstruct and then reassemble somewhere halfway around the world, but they do.
Yeah. And I'm going to say the other thing, like I said, going to the British Grand Prix as a spectator, when Robin first mentioned it, I'm kind of like, yeah, okay. Now, she loves racing as much as I do, and it was a big thing, so I'm going.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm thinking, okay, I'm a terrible spectator, so I'm, okay, you know, I'll go along. It was fantastic. And I got to say, the best part of it was the atmosphere, the energy in the crowd. Now, it was the British Grand Prix, and we had, you know, Robin's wearing a T-shirt that says Lewis, Lando, and George. Like, the Brits get behind the Brit drivers, right? You know, so there is that going on. But there is, and you know, I've been to F1 races in the U.S. and Canada, and
there's still some of it. There's a lot of it. Yeah,
there's a lot of it because there's people. So that energy. If you get the opportunity to go to a race, go, because it is, even though there are some things that we can see on TV that we can't see in real life, we see and hear and feel other things. Like you feel that energy from the crowd.
Okay, so that's probably a good note to partly close things on. I've got one more thing I want to ask you here, but that's a really good point, right? If you only ever watch on television, and like the unfortunate thing here is that F1 races require travel. The tickets, even the spectator ticket, is not cheap. Parking is a hassle. Logistics in town, anywhere the circus shows up, are monstrous. Like you don't want to be in downtown Austin when the Grand Prix is going on, unless you desperately want to be in downtown Austin. You know what I mean? Hear that. But the idea that it does take so much effort to get there and to pull one of these things off, and so much wallet to make it happen in a way that's satisfying, even at the barest level, shouldn't offset the fact that if you plan on watching it on TV for the rest of your life, you kind of owe it to yourself to think about getting to at least one. Because if you go to that one, as much as the sport has changed over the years, and it has changed so much, even in the past 5 or 6, but as much as it has changed, the circus is still the circus. And the vibe that you get there, you know, you go to Monza once, you go to Spa once, you go to Coda once, you have some idea. They're all very different, and the emotions are all very different, but you have some idea of what's there. And when you watch it on TV, there's something about what your brain does. It colors it just a little, and it makes it just that much more broad, deep, compelling. Pick your word. There's something different. But so on that note, I've got I've got one more question that I want to split into two parts. Right. So what you do, because the other thing is the reason we did this episode is because so much of the sport can be just a rampant snooze, right? And yet so much of it is so ferociously cool. So, what do you do when you get bored watching it and you want to get back on board, even if the race isn't boring? And B, what what do you, when you're at the track, when you're when you're watching it on TV, what if you had to pick one, maybe two things that are the absolute coolest thing about it for you? What are they? So, first thing, what do you do when you're bored and you need to be on board? How do you think about it? Look at
I ask myself, what can I learn from this? Which I do kind of all the time. But often when I am watching an F1 race, I have my phone there with the notes, and I've just, I put in, I don't know, Miami Grand Prix.
Yeah.
And as the race is going on, I might make a note of, Perez is pitting early. What's the strategy behind that? Or, Max's maximum braking is incredible. Like I'll just start making notes of things that I observe, I guess. And yeah.
Well, I mean, but that's real.
I like to learn.
And that's real, right? And I don't think there's any shame in admitting, okay, well, I don't know what's going on here. And by the same token, there's no shame in while you're watching it, whether you're sitting in the stands or you're at home, pulling out a laptop or a phone. I mean, don't pull out a laptop in the stands. You'll just get beer on it. Or if you're in England, you'll just get English people on it. And, I mean, don't want that. But
warm beer.
Pull out a phone and find a live blog from, somebody who's pulling the sport apart, Autosport or any of the other magazines that do that, where they'll actually sit there and sometimes every few seconds, maybe every minute or two, someone will punch in, some reporter who has a line in the pits and knows everything will punch in a couple of sentences about what's happening, or follow on Threads, or X/Twitter used to be great for this. It's not so much anymore because so many people left it. And right, it's a whole other subject, but Threads in particular is really good for it. But find people pulling it apart who have more context than you do and sit there and flip through it. I mean, I don't watch the races anymore without a laptop or a screen in front of me, because it helps me know what the hell I'm missing. Or sometimes even just politically, what's happened last night that didn't, that really impacted today, And that's, so many people think that you kind of have to approach it through one channel, or that you should know everything that's going on. That's crap, right? Just learn things.
Yeah. And the bottom line is when we started talking about this, and when you suggested this topic, I'm kind of like, yeah, well, it's a bit unfair because, we kind of joked about the napping and stuff like that in some F1 races. Absolutely, for sure, there are times when I'm watching an F1 race and I'm thinking, this is not the most exciting race. There's not a lot of passing going on. It's a parade. But when I ask myself, what can I learn from this? There is something there. And at the end of the day, after all these years, as much as I said I'm not a spectator, I am a fan. I love it. I mean, I watch a Formula One race. I watch an IndyCar, an IMSA race. And I've got many years where I couldn't watch a single race live because I was at a track and I couldn't do that. Now I've sort of arranged things so I can watch more, but I love it. And I can watch a NASCAR race. And I know there's some road racing people that go, NASCAR, that's boring. Not if you look at it the right way. And I'll watch anything. I'll watch anything with wheels on it. And I find it super fast. And just because we're recording this smack in the middle of the Olympics, when the runners, to me, track and field is really cool to watch. And when runners line up on that start line and they do that camera thing where they go from one runner to the next runner to the next runner, and you see, some runners that are got this grumpy face on their, like they're looking like
Right.
I'm going to kill the world kind of thing. And the other one's like, woo, I'm at the Olympics, Mom. That to me that's the human part.
Yeah.
So you can't go wrong with that. So
Well,
be a fan.
The whole point about again, I want to get back to the cool thing, but the whole point about how it's ultimately there's something to learn or cool about it, no matter what part of the sport it is, and the fact that like it's on wheels, it's interesting. It reminded me of how like I remember the first time I went through the time it was an American Le Mans paddock, and walking through it, and with a press pass, looking at all the transporters, and the big long semi transporters, big tractor trailer thing. The cars go on the top. There's an elevator, the back tailgate that lifts them up on the top. And then beneath that is a kind of a narrow walkway with cabinets on each side and workbenches all down the side of it. And many of them have either televisions or laptops set up on those counters. And I remember walking through the paddock and seeing through many of the doors. Like I think Penske's doors are still mirrored, but many of the doors are just tinted and some of them are open. You can see through them either way. I remember the first time I looked in one and went, just glanced by and saw like 2 or 3 mechanics standing around watching whatever it was an American Le Mans race. And they're watching whatever NASCAR race was on that weekend. And sometimes you go to an IMSA race and you're like, they're watching F1. You go to the full circle on this was when I was in, I think it was the first time, one of the times I went to COTA for Austin for the GP, and they were watching whatever the hell like NASCAR thing was going on that week. And I was like, oh, it's full circle. Nobody, like it's not bifurcated. It's just like, oh, cool, wheeled thing, doing stuff, racing.
And at an IMSA race,
yeah,
all work stops in the paddock when the MX-5 Cup race comes on, because we all have to watch that. Yeah. It's tough to be in this sport without being somewhat of a fan of the sport.
Yeah. So, all right. So on that, the last thing, what's the one, I'll give you 1.5, maybe 2 if you want. The coolest thing about watching it for you. What do you lean toward? What do you come back to every time?
Well, sorry to repeat myself, but it's what I learn.
Yeah,
it's at the end of a race, I go, okay, I'm a little bit smarter. Which in my case, when you're starting so low, it's pretty easy to ramp it up a notch or 2. But at the end of a race, I'm a little bit smarter, or I'm questioning, why did they do that? Why did that driver do that? Why did that driver position their car there? Why did they not position it over there? So I either come away with more questions or more learnings.
That is the most Ross Bentley answer I can think of. I like that.
Well, and I'm going to add, and I was entertained, because even a boring race is entertaining to me.
So with that, we are out of time, I'm afraid, which means it is time to read us out. So I usually read the boilerplate here, and I usually slip in some gibberish about how Mike, our producer, stalks us in our sleep or something, because all we do is make his life difficult. But last time we taped, I asked Jeff to do it because it sounded amusing to me, and he humored me because he is a very nice man. And this time, Jeff is not here, and that means that I have all the power, and for like totally arbitrary reasons, I've just made up right now, that means Ross is going to read it. Ross, are you good to read us out?
Oh, this is uncomfortable.
I know, but it's great. Learn something. It's great.
Well, okay. So I am literally going to read us out, okay?
It's a script. That's okay.
Okay. So here it goes. It's Not the Car is produced by us.
Go. Try again.
The one and only Mike Perlman is our executive producer.
Breathe.
Sam is the show's creator. Oh, you want me to do it different? Okay. Hey. Come on down. For more bonus content, perks, and future live events, you can subscribe to our free news feed at patreon.com/notthecar. That option is at the 3 little dots. And I always kind of go, why is Sam always talking about the 3 little dots?
There's 3 dots.
3 little dots on the upper right side of the screen.
They're there. It's hard to see. I say this because we had people, we actually had an email from a guy who was like, I went to the thing and I didn't see your news feed, and I would like to find your news feed. And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. It's up in the thing. And he's like, well, those dots are not easy to see. And I went and looked, and he's right. The dots are not easy to see. And so that is because I don't want to assume anymore. I want to help.
I don't know whose idea it was to put 3 little dots that you get. Anyways, I'm pretty sure now at the end of this show, nobody's going to have a problem finding 3 little dots or no but. Anyways, if you like this episode and you'd like to support what we do here, check out that same Patreon link and click Become a Member. There's nothing like being a member. Like, come on, join the club.
Keep reading, Bentley. Go.
You know, it's kind of like, dude, you know, when you had the tree fort and you're like, hey, come on into the tree fort.
Okay.
Anyways.
I thought you were making there was a subtextual joke there, but please, I'm glad there wasn't. Just go on, pretend I didn't say anything.
No, okay.
Be a good member.
Okay.
Go, yes. Mm-hmm.
I'm going back to...
Okay. Hey,
if you're enjoying the show, please share it with 2 or 3 or 1 million people, or more than 1 million people. And I got to... This is total tangent. Sorry, Sam, but it is really cool when somebody says, you know, at the track and somebody comes up and goes, hey, a friend of mine told me about your podcast and I listened to it and it's fantastic. So thank you. That's really cool. So please share it. You will become their favorite friend.
What? Really? That's not in the script.
Yeah.
Is it true?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Okay.
No,
your recommendations make a huge difference and they really do help us keep It's Not the Car on the air, which I always kind of wonder, like, this is on the air?
It's a figure of speech.
Okay.
This is, if this was designed to get me to never let you do this again, I think it worked.
Yay, I did it. Okay.
Canada is more crafty than I thought.
And thanks for listening. This has been fun.
Thank you for listening and have fun. Thanks, Ross.
Thanks.